We continue on the 40-man crunch, and we are looking for further deletions on today's Locked On Marlins. Shaun Barrett is back in the house. We have 2 names penciled in. We need another 3, at least. We're going to dig into that, maybe even go further to see if the Marlins need to clear even more room. How can they do it? All on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins, your daily Marlins podcast with me, Peter Pratt. Do not forget to follow me, of course, guys, on Twitter at MiamiMarlins_UK. Hit subscribe to the pod if you are listening, or if you are listening and think you'd like to see our faces, there is a YouTube channel. Get over there. Hit subscribe there too. You will see Shaun Barrett is back in the house. It's Tuesday's episode. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. Shaun, welcome back. Same clothes as yesterday. That's how we roll. How you doing?
You got to stretch it out in this economy, haven't you?
Yeah,
I'm doing well, Pete. It's good to join you again. I'm always here, ready to talk baseball with you. That's for sure.
No doubt about it. Absolute stud, the wingman, no doubt. And you're completely right, by the way. I mean, I only have one outfit. I've been in this Gymshark outfit for the whole year. I mean, everything's been recorded live and televised, and I can't get away from that. I only have one Gymshark outfit. Nevertheless. We're talking 40-man, Shaun. We started the ball rolling yesterday. Jose Devers, I think rightly is the first name on there. And secondly, Eliezer Hernandez equally. There's no way the Marlins are paying $2 million, and there's no role for Eliezer, so he's got to go. Let's get this ball rolling here, mate, for today, because we've got plenty of ground to cover, I fear. Throw me out there another name that you think is perhaps... You did call out to say that Tommy Nance you felt shouldn't be one that we move. Throw out a name there that you feel a little bit more pessimistic on.
I think the next guy up for me is Hoeing. He's one of those arms the team brought up. He needed some innings out of him, and to be honest, didn't deliver, did he? I mean, it is a case of it is what it is, and again, as we said yesterday, it is a case of if you send him down. What team are going to look at that and go, we need that on our roster? I think he's a guy that could clear waivers quite easily. At the end of the day, I'm not gonna speak bad about the guy, but the numbers aren't there. This is a situation where the team need to get down to 40, and that's the case we're at.
Shaun, I have to be honest with you. I don't say this very often. I completely agree with everything you've just said. The way I look at it, with Hoeing in particular, I just think it's almost last in, first out. That's the way it should be looked at. These guys, like Brian Hoeing, was brought up that late in the year. That to me says he should be one of the first to be gone because he's added for depth. They needed him for depth. And then, like you said, when he came up and had a chance to, make a couple of starts, I guess. He started one game, so maybe that's overselling it. But he ends up, it's 22 regular season. He ends up with a 12 ERA. For me, we probably should have started here. We should have started with Hoeing and said, he's got to go. I mean, I just can't see how the Marlins legitimately could keep... what are the pros for keeping him? Maybe that he's got 2 options remaining. I mean, they did draft him as well. He was a 7th-round pick. What were his minor league numbers eye-popping? I actually don't know. I haven't got them in front of me. Let me have a quick look. What did he do? Let's have a look here. He threw 9 on 100 innings in AAA last year. So I guess, he's got that, but it was a 5 ERA still at AAA. So come on.
And a 4.69 K per 9. He's just not missing bats.
He's not missing bats. He's just hitting barrels.
Pretty much it, yeah. I think you're right in the sense of he should have been the number 1 guy on our list. I think he realistically probably is the first guy to go from. He will be the 4th guy essentially that the Marlins sent down.
No doubt about it. Let's revise this because I don't want to do any dirty here for Eliezer and Jose Devers. Let's put Brian Hoeing as the number one to go. I mean, it doesn't really matter the rankings, but nevertheless, Hoeing I think is added to that list, joining Devers and Eliezer. This may be more of a short list, by the way. We may end up with more than 5, and it's quite possible we do. So I'm going to take the next one and throw a name out there, and let's see where you go with this one. Also a pitcher. Nick Neidert. Nick Neidert. So he's had an interesting last couple of years with the Marlins, where he's been up and down quite a few starts, even in 2020. I think he was on the opening day roster in 2020, if I recall. Maybe not, but he definitely pitched, plenty. It was that kind of year where he was up. I mean, everyone was up in 2020, but in 21, he was up and down a lot as well, where they were trying to find innings from anywhere. I'm not sure what the future holds here, but I can certainly see a pathway to Nick Neidert being maybe traded. I think there's maybe something in there in that profile that maybe someone like, he's only 26. He does have an option remaining. Let's not forget he was a second round pick in 2015. Not with the Marlins, but with the Mariners. But for me, Nick Neidert, I think, is definitely a candidate to go. I do think he could be claimed, though. Like I could see maybe the Marlins moving him, but in a trade. And so maybe this won't quite happen right away in this kind of crunch situation. Or maybe they can. I mean, trades are open and available. They can pull the trigger on anything. It's possible that, they should be out there seeking trades for these guys they're looking to waive. Where's your head at with Nick Neidert? Should it be on this short list?
I think he should stick. I think he should be sticking in that 40-man role. I think there's value there. I think he's sort of in that role of sort of where Garrett was. Him and Costello were all kind of these long men / fifth starters. Potential guys, next guys up at AAA, and I think that's kind of the role that Neidert can carry for the Marlins, or as you said, any team that trade for him. I think there are better names, worse names. I just want to clarify. There are better names for guys that are less deserving to be on the 40-man. Which I think there still is major league value there.
Do you know the thing with Neidert? You're completely right. Like, he is in that bucket. He's in the Braxton Garrett bucket where we're all sitting in now and going, like last year, we were all like, nah, Brax hasn't got it. And then all of a sudden, flick a switch. Next thing is we think about Brax. Like, Neidert is that guy. The other thing I want to throw out that I've just thought about, let's not forget Cody Poteet was on the opening day roster and was sensational in that long man role. Cody Poteet will not be pitching in 23. The Marlins are going to need the long man role to be filled in any way they can with some reliable, because it's important to have that guy, particularly maybe back end rotation pieces clearly. And so there is a need for a Neidert, a Dan Castano, those guys that have the ability to go longer. Obviously, Cody Poteet with Tommy John won't be back around. Thompson obviously was a guy that could do that as well, who was traded. Then Paul Campbell's now a guy who could do that. He's now off the 40-man. So it's a really good point you make there. Like, there is a major league role I can see for Neidert. If they do look to, I still can see a trade happening involving Neidert, though, at some point. Wait and see. But I'm with you on that one, Shaun. I don't think he is waived at this point. Okay, where's your head at next? Which is the next guy for us to get into and discuss?
And again, this guy probably should have been second on the list yesterday, and that's Nardi.
Andrew Nardi, boy, oh boy. Is he still on the 40-man?
Yeah, he's still on the 40-man.
Yeah,
so
we missed that one.
Just could not throw strikes. So an 8.5 walk per 9. I think that's no team's claiming that for sure. So again, look, at the end of the day, this is a cruel experience, because what we're basically talking about is wrecking people's dreams of playing for a Major League Baseball team. So it's cruel, but ultimately the stats speak for themselves. It's no slight on them at all. They are professional baseball players. But yeah, Nardi for me is not on that 40-man role. Goes back down. Does he stay with the team? It will be interesting, but ultimately there's nothing in what we saw. Guy can throw strikes, then he would be great because his stuff's pretty wicked. Those K9s across all the levels he's pitched at are great. Just that walk rate that he displayed at major league level are atrocious.
You're dead on again, Shaun. I mean, I just can't. I just can't knock anything you've said. Like, the reality is both Hoeing and Nardi we should have spoken about in episode 1, and that's on us. We just got straight into the buzzy names, let's say, because the reality is Eliezer and Devers are buzzier names than those two guys. Neither of them were on the roster at the start of the year. That's usually an indication that they should be some of the names, the first names considered. Because let's not forget, Devers and Eliezer both were on the roster at the start of the year. And those, Nardi and Hoeing, they haven't shown enough. Granted, to use your phrase, mate, small sample size, small sample sizes, but we just haven't seen enough. And I think, yeah, absolutely, they should be on there. So where does that take us then? I guess I'm with you on that. Nardi, Hoeing, Devers, Eliezer. Is that the 4 we're going with at the moment?
That's where my head is for sure.
Okay.
The 5th one is a bit more interesting.
Yeah, the 5th one is juicy. Before we do that, reminder, guys, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Everything. Football, basketball, soccer, esports, they've got it all covered at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, well, you're in the right place, but also BetOnline, you can find those on BetOnline too. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. This starts to get very interesting. I can still see at least 2 or 3 candidates that remain we haven't spoken about yet. Shaun, I will let you throw out one more name for now, and there could be someone that you think is on the cusp but you'd like to see staying. But for me, there's definitely still a few that we haven't touched on, particularly some of the outfield guys, which looks crowded on this 40-man. It looks like a lot of guys in the outfield, but maybe we kind of touched on Luke Williams already. But hey, where's your head at? I won't lead the witness.
Well, you say about the offense that the outfielders, they're guys I think wouldn't pass, and I think this last person is no matter who we choose, it's going to be difficult to see them pass through. So we've talked a lot of pitchers, so we might as well bring up one last one, and that's Brigham.
Jeff Brigham.
Yeah, he didn't pitch badly. Pitched perfectly serviceable. They were good enough innings. They are major league quality innings, and it's just such a difficult thing because a guy at the back end of your rotation, you might be able to sneak him through. These outfielders and the other players that we're going to go on to talk about, I just think that there's some name value, that there's some pedigree value, there's some draft capital that's been expended to acquire them. I think you're going to struggle to pass them through. Brigham, when you think about all those arms that are going to be going from all the organizations, has a chance to pass through. But if he's the first guy that I'm saying could be waived, that I actually would prefer not to see waived. Because at least I would like to see him remain in the organization, is a better way of putting it. So it's risky putting him up there, but I think that it's a risk worth maybe taking just because he could, well, hopefully pass through.
You're right, this starts to get interesting now, and we have to remember that Shaun Gunther was claimed. So let's not forget that situation. So anyone could be claimed here. Brigham's an interesting one, right? Because, yeah, to your point, it is probably one of the least sexy names that there is. It's one of the least sexiest names out there. It has to be. But I actually thought he was serviceable. Like, he pitched fine, to be honest. Like, I can't really knock it. What was his number saying? Just over 3 ERA, 3.3 ERA. Okay, it's only in 24 innings, but I think Brigham was okay. I'm with you that he could pass because the name lacks sex appeal. I think that's the point you're making there with Brigham. Minor league options remaining on him are 2. Let me just throw another couple of guys out there for you because I think a lot of this does center around the pitching, really, because just the sheer amount of arms that went down, as they do. I wanted to ask you about both Jordan Holloway and Dan Castano. Granted, we've just talked about the long man role and the need to fill it, and these guys equally can play that role. Nyder, Castano, Holloway, I think all of them can play that role. I think my confidence levels are greatest probably with Dan Castano at this phase over all of those three. Like if I had to pitch one out of the pen, I'd lean on Castano. The reason I bring these up, mate, is both Holloway and Castano, 0 minor league options remaining. And I think this is where it gets interesting now, where Nyder has an option. These two other guys, 0 options. If you continue to retain them, you're effectively saying, there's a lot of water that travels under the bridge, but you're saying that they have a very legitimate chance of being on the opening day roster. That's the kind of commitment you make at this point. If you keep Holloway and Castano, that you think they have a chance. How would you feel about both those guys being on the opening day roster, if indeed that were to be the case, both Holloway and Castano?
I think it's an interesting topic because it is that sense of like Brigham probably will give you better innings, but these guys give you more innings.
Yeah.
And it depends on how you value that, because let's not fool ourselves. You need a lot of pitching in baseball.
Yeah,
we've seen it all the time. We'll go into every year going, we've got arms for the days, and then all of a sudden it's to June and July.
Run out of days, I know.
You're running out of arms. So you need these people, and it is that concern of guys that can give you length are going to always be tempting for other teams, especially when I think we as Marlins fans, while still struggling for innings, probably don't realise just how hard it is around the league, because there is some slop being thrown out there. And these are guys that I think wouldn't pass, which is why I thought about Brigham, just simply because he's a short-arm reliever. He's a guy that, has value because he does pitch well, or at least pitched well this year. But guys like Holloway, guys like Castano, again, like we were talking about with Garrett, and it is that case of you need these innings, you need these guys. It is interesting that the Marlins could choose to pick one and not the other, because, as you said, having both of them locked in the roster is interesting. I would agree with you. I'd probably lean Castano as well. That's not just because of the cowboy hat, but it's because
it is a plus, though.
It is a plus. He's been there and he's done it, and he's as a fan, he's a guy that when he comes onto the mound, I'm thinking that this is a positive. You get a good feeling. I know that's rubbish analysis in the sense of stats and numbers, but sometimes as a fan, that's all you want, is when you're watching a game, you're trusting that this is going to be a positive experience. And I think when I see Castano pitch, I've enjoyed what he's done, and I think the numbers are there just enough to back that up as well.
Yeah, this is a real tough one here, like between these guys. Let me just segue you away from the pitch in a second. Let me just ask you about some other guys, because we have to ask these questions too. What about Lewin Diaz at this point? I mean, let's assume, should we assume that he isn't under consideration at this point? Or should he be under consideration? Should the Marlins be thinking, actually, he's not part of our future, I think it's time to move on? Again, 0 options with Lewin, so he's either on the roster or he's not, effectively. I do think that he would be claimed personally. Like, I think the upside is high there with Lewin. I think someone would take, like I said, Gunther was claimed. Lewin Diaz is being claimed, no doubt. So they absolutely can't sneak him through waivers. But take that away, should the Marlins be considering cutting bait with Lewin Diaz at this point?
I mean, I feel like they've put themselves in somewhat of a hole, because how often were we talking about the idea of what more does he need to prove at the minor league level? Now, he didn't have a good year this year, but the 2021 season where he had a lot of power down in the minors, and he just never got an opportunity really at the major league level. The defense we know is stellar, but how much value is that at first base? I've spoke about that a lot. I think you're right in the sense of he would probably get claimed. Team are going to kick the tires on him, but I think that's where we are with any player that we're picking for this fifth person, as I said. So I think the Marlins, I think they will consider it. I think he is absolutely on that short list of players that they're looking at and saying, where are we with this guy?
Yeah.
And I think now that you've brought in a guy like Gresham's, guy that can play, play the corners, guy that hopefully will bring a bit of power, I think it is that scenario. Lewin was always the next guy up, wasn't it? You had Aguilar, you had Coop, and it was always, well, what are we going to do with Lewin? We've got 3 first basemen. That's not the case now because obviously Aggie's gone, Coop's staying, obviously, but won't see much time at first. Hopefully, mostly at DH.
Yeah.
So they're going to need another guy on the 40 that's first base eligible.
Yeah.
But do we really feel comfortable having that being Lewin Diaz as fans, as going into a season where I keep saying this is a shortening window of period of time where the Marlins should be trying to compete.
Yeah.
And
it's shrinking, isn't it?
It really is. It's getting concerning.
Yeah. No, it is.
I think they need him at first base, and Lewin could therefore be a casualty.
Yeah, for sure. The other name that we haven't spoken about, which in some ways we wouldn't have done, but I think it's right for us to call out, just because of the phrase that I'll use here is "no smoke without fire," and what I mean by that is, mistakenly, on Sunday, Richard Blyer's name appeared on the transactions list for the Marlins. It said that Richard Blyer had elected free agency. He actually didn't have that decision to make. He had a guaranteed contract for 23. So it was a mistake. It was an error. But I'm not sure how it gets to the point where Richard Blyer's name appears on an official Major League Baseball transactions list associated to anything. Unless there's something happening in the background. Let's say maybe a trade. Maybe I doubt they'd eat the money. Like it's like what, $3.5 million or something. The Marlins are not eating that dough. However, maybe they'd look to trade away that that player, maybe for minimal return. Kind of like where they moved Corey Dickerson, and they wanted to move Corey Dickerson and the money. So they added a reliever. Who was the reliever with him? Adam Simba. So they decided, hey, let's move Corey Dickerson. To get the deal done, we'll give you Simba so you can take a bit of the dough. I think they ended up retaining the money, so I might be talking rubbish. But anyway, maybe the Marlins are thinking, let's move Blyer as 3.5. Is there any smoke here with this fire, or is this is this an admin error, Shaun, in your opinion?
I mean, it's hard to say. What I would say is I like Blyer. I like his profile. I like that ground ball aspect. I like that he continues to be a major league positive player with such a low K rate. He is an absolute unicorn. He is a player with very few comparables. I like Blyer's game. I like Blyer. I think his personality is great. And again, I'm just a guy watching the telly, so how much can I really tell from afar? But I would miss Blyer for many reasons. I think that number is high. You look at his numbers for the season, and they're okay. They're all right. But for the Marlins, sometimes you look at players differently when they come attached with anything above major league minimum money.
Yeah.
And I think if the Marlins were looking to offload that money, then a trade would absolutely. He is a major league player. There's 29 teams that would happily pay Blyer the money that he's owed to pitch the way he pitches, especially in that second half.
Yeah.
I remember the first half we were talking, and we've talked about him since, but the first half talking about the idea of he's a ground ball pitcher, not getting ground balls. He fixed that in the second half, got back to being him, and pitched pretty good, actually. I honestly would be more than happy having Blyer coming out in the 7th, occasionally in the 8th, depending on matchups for the Marlins next year at the money that he's owed for sure.
Yeah, just no balks. That's what we need. No balks from Blyer. But I've always believed in Richard and will continue to do so. I'm with you. I just thought it was a very interesting situation that a name appeared on a transaction list in that way. And I think, how has that happened? And how is it Richard Blyer's name? Got me kind of thinking. So to your point, the Marlins may be looking to trade away some guys here just to try and either upgrade the offense or clear the logjam, Richard Blyer is a major league pitcher and has value, and thus creates this. Us fans like, hey, let's try and trade Eliezer Hernandez like last year and even this year. Like, it ain't happening, right? Because Eliezer, no one's going to send you anything for him because they know he's on the cusp of being DFA'd. But for Blyer, it's a different situation. Wait and see. Okay, let me just ask you about if they really struggle here. This was something else that's floated around on Twitter, and I think it was an interesting strategy. And our good man from also over in the UK, Alan Witz, dedicated listener, Witzy, hope you are well. And the idea was floated around was about moving your third string catcher at this point. If you are struggling to create the room, is this an opportunity to move the third string catcher, which is Peyton Henry, right? So that, I think, is an interesting strategy because in reality, the third catcher can be backfilled pretty easily. Like, they can easily find someone else to fill that role. Can you see that as a realistic situation or a requirement at this point? Or is there that many other guys that they think, actually, we're good on that front, we can just move some of these arms?
I think it is definitely a discussion point. I think it's definitely a way that the team could go if they so believe in the rest of the guys. But my concern is that after Henry, there isn't really much upper major league catching guys. Now, you can go out and get a veteran. Yeah. I mean, there are
Sandy Leon special, right?
There are probably 100 guys, champing at the bit to get down into up into AAA, who are 34, 35, 36-year-old catchers. Ultimately, if you're at the point where you're using your third man catcher regularly, then how much value you're going to get from that role anyway. So it's absolutely a ways to go, but I think that the team would truly have to be all out on Henry to risk him, because ultimately, good catchers don't grow on trees. Average catchers don't either, and even poor catchers don't. Catchers are really hard to acquire at every single level of baseball. So to give up one because it helps you with a crunch, it would be an interesting tactic.
Agreed. The only name we haven't spoken about that I've seen floated around somewhat on Twitter was Brazoban. So we haven't mentioned him. Neither of us have brought him up. I haven't brought him up because actually I think he should be on the 40-man. I was quite encouraged at times of what I saw. Yes, the walks were a touch high. It's fair to say. And, we saw that. But, speaking about walks being a touch high, look at Tanner Scott. He was closing for the majority of the season, and his walk rate was absolutely astronomical. His K rate was astronomical too. So I think, for me, I'm happy with Brazoban. I see more there than the majority of the guys we've spoken about, quite significantly, actually. And I assume you feel the same, Shaun, but I wanted to make sure we left no stone unturned on this one. But for you, Brazoban is safe or should be safe?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he's got no pedigree.
No.
He's got no major sort of minor league quality sort of numbers there. He's 32 years old. I mean, it's interesting. But the only thing you can say is he pitched pretty well for the Marlins.
Yeah.
Limited innings. I think he could potentially stay. I think there's enough there. The walks, you need that to get fixed for sure. But then it's the same sort of situation where you give him time with Mel. Those walks can come down. Mel seems to be pretty good at turning these guys that come from nowhere into decent major league pitching guys. But I think Brazoban, I can see why he's a name on people's lips as far as a guy that could go down. But I don't know. I think there's enough there with the stuff. Again, I'm talking about acquiring guys that can catch. Getting guys that have stuff is hard as well. It's just those walks. He needs to know where he's putting the ball. And if he can develop that, and that's why the stuff's so enticing. If he can develop even half decent weight control, then you're looking at a guy that all of a sudden you're putting into the eighth role.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. Like he's 32, 33, so whether you want to call him raw. I mean, I guess he is who he is at this stage, but he's not been with like a major league staff, and we've seen what Mel can do, and and the pitching coach as well was retained. So we've seen what they can do. They can turn these guys, these rough diamonds, into major league guys that can contribute for major league minimum dough. That's a good thing too. So I can see Brazaban staying. One final name, and then we'll kind of wrap things up here and actually solidify and lock in our 5. And we may have more than 5 at this point. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about one other guy that I think is certainly, it's up for debate in terms of arbitration. And I think we're all leaning towards Brian Anderson being non-tendered. I just get the sense that it feels like that's been known for months. And with that being said, I think the Marlins would have been, they'd have been trying to source, was anyone interested trade-wise, like, the Georgie Alfaro situation last year. And they did. They managed to pick up like a player to be named later that, was, who knows who he was. Anyway, if they can't find a trade partner in the next couple of days for BA, could BA perhaps be a guy they just release now at this point to clear a spot? Like, is that possible?
I mean, it's possible in the sense of if he's not in the team's future plans, and I'd argue that they probably shouldn't be, then, and if you can't get a trade, by now you'll know if you can get a trade or what you're going to get in return for him.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing, I mean that arbitration number is tradable. It's not a Marlins number, I don't think, especially with the way that the team's set up. But I think it is tradable. I think they should be able to for him. So I don't think it's a case of could they designate him, because of that he's not in the future plans and they don't want to pay that money. I think the idea that they could trade him before that deadline of having to get down there is perfectly reasonable.
Agreed. Yeah, I just want to call it out because I do feel like Eliezer, there's a good chance that we don't even get through the arbitration process with him, and so he should be in scope at this point to be moved. Anyway, we're 32 minutes in, so that means we're 10 minutes over time. But we wanted to give you guys the full coverage and discussion on this one, so we've enjoyed it. Shaun, let's kind of pin it together then, mate. Let's piece everything together and come up with our 5 names at least that we think should be deleted from the 40-man that currently sits at 45 right now. The guys I've noted down here, Brian Hoeing, we agreed in episode 2, should have probably been number 1. Andrew Nardi was also added to that list. We've then got Eliezer Hernandez. We've then got Jose Devers. They're the 4 certs that I've got down. I think we're both in agreement on those 4 names. I don't think we've got a 5th name yet. So there's a short list brewing here of Brigham, Castano, Nider, Holloway, Lewin Diaz, Brian Anderson, Peyton Henry, maybe. Where are you leaning? And have I missed anyone?
No, that's definitely the list. Funnily enough, now that you just listed that list of guys, I do think there's probably more than one on that list of realistic ideas. But I think it has to be Lewin for me. I just
Lewin? Oh my days!
I don't see an avenue for him to get playing time. I think the Marlins are going to go out there and look for some veteran depth at first base. Just to, as you said before when we talked about Coop, I'm happy with Coop, but I think some insurance there is needed, and I just don't see Lewin. I don't see Lewin delivering that at the major league level. I think if we go into the season going, Lewin's the next guy up, I just don't feel like we've seen enough recently. And it's a shame because there was a period of time where we were really excited about the prospect of him coming up, with all that raw power, that good defense. It's just, unfortunately, that toolsy approach that the team took over actual baseball acumen ultimately didn't work out, and that's why they made a massive change in the way that they acquire players. And I think Lewin is another eventual casualty of that.
Oh boy. This is a real tough one for me. I'd actually, if it was me, I'd hang on to Lewin at this point. I'd probably move one of the three of Neidert, Holloway, or Castano. And I'd already said that I prefer Castano out of those three, particularly. I'd probably go Holloway. I mean, that's tough. It's a tough call, but one of those maybe. I mean, maybe Brigham would be the right one. Just kind of slip him through there, so to speak. This is the point, though, Shaun. This is a tough one. The fifth name, I think, is less obvious. Let me just go back to Lewin, though. I completely agree. We have to look at this and go, are we happy are the Marlins seriously looking to try and win games and contend in 23 if Lewin Diaz is on the roster all year, having just been given a huge opportunity at the back end of the year against stripped down teams? Granted, the Marlins' schedule was pretty tough at the back end, so they weren't all cupcakes. But Lewin hitting 174, 5 home runs, 1 stolen bag, by the way, and a 512 OPS. I'm sorry, but it's not good enough. The glove does not carry that. It isn't. If we were to look at that in a vacuum, Lewin Diaz should not be on this roster. However, there is, I think, a perceived value. There's always a value where you've been a top prospect. And with that, I think they have the opportunity to hold on to Lewin and look to make a deal later down the line with some other team. With that being said, I come back to your point you made. I'm going to go back to Jeff Brigham then. Going to have to be Brigham. I don't know. Maybe it should be Holloway. This is tough. This is tough. I think what we're saying there is, and I can't rule out Blyer either. I honestly, I'm very intrigued to see if anything happens with Blyer. I mean, let's see. But if we're going to go on 5 guys that should be deleted, we've got 4 obvious, and we've got 1 that we're struggling on. I hate to say it, but if you strip away everything, it probably should be Lewin. I don't think it will be Lewin for the reasons I've shared, but I think I have to agree that Lewin shouldn't be on this roster. So maybe we lock in Lewin Diaz.
I mean, I think it's a positive that we are struggling to get down to 40. Ultimately, it is a case of there's enough talent, I think, in this team, in this organization, that makes this decision tough. And that's a good thing. And I'm just thankful that I'm a fan and I don't have to make these decisions.
Absolutely.
But, I trust in this organization to make the right calls. And it's still in the off season, still interesting. And there's still enough news to keep me interested. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's more to come. We're going to wrap things up there. I think we've landed somehow on Lewin as the 5th player. So we're going to put that out there and go with those 5. There's at least 4 others that could be in contention. Trade season is open. We did see that the Braves were straight out of the gate. They've made a trade for an outfielder. So trade season is open. Free agent season is not yet open. So we still have a good couple of days for that. Free agents, for those that are kind of wondering what I'm on about, if you have been with a club, you can still negotiate in this period, the kind of cooling off period, let's say, with your previous team. There's then the qualifying offer situation that will then start to come through before free agents can then negotiate with other clubs. I think that's from I want to say the 16th, but I may be wrong on the date of that. But anyway, let's say a week's time. We also have the upcoming situation around the Cy Young, where the shortlist will be announced from the baseball writers, and then also announced in the coming weeks. We also have the draft lottery that will be coming as well in early December, the first ever draft lottery. The Marlins, they didn't make the postseason, so they are in the lottery. We'll dig into that and look at what their percentages are in the next couple of weeks. I'll take some time to dig into that. But Shaun, we've somehow done 2 episodes in one off the back of another one. We could have made it a 3-parter, but nevertheless, it's a 2-parter. I thank you as always, brother, for joining me on this one, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I think it's been a healthy debate, and the reality is the Marlins can go in many directions. Let's not forget the Marlins only won 69 games in 22. The roster needs to be better. The window is closing, as Shaun has mentioned, and we need to get better quick. The way to do that, there's many ways to achieve it, but I don't think it's via free agency. So they have to be smart with this period. And I think equally see this maybe as an opportunity to grab some additional talent from other clubs that also are swelling with talent. Nevertheless, on the 40-minute mark, that's Locked On Marlins done on Tuesday. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. Back on Wednesday, of course, I'll see you then.